Hi, everybody. My name is Dave Doebler. I'm co-founder of volunteercleanup.org. And let me see if I can get this silly thing out of my way. Zoom, go away. I'm co-founder of volunteercleanup.org. I'm also a steering committee member of Biscayne Bay Marine Health Coalition. I primarily focus on marine debris, but as I work backwards in trying to prevent marine debris from coming in or into the bay, I realize we have to reduce the volume of material we create, and we need to manage our waste better. So I partnered with Mitch, let her introduce herself from Recycle Across America on a really exciting program that we're going to tell you about today, a pilot project. Mitch?
Thank you very much for that, Dave. And thank you, everybody, for joining and inviting us in. I am Mitch, short for Michelle. I'm the founder and executive director of the nonprofit organization Recycle Across America. And I started in 2010 an initiative to fix recycling or fix the confusion with recycling by introducing society-wide standardized labels for recycling bins. So we have had the opportunity to speak at the European Union and United Nations and to work on legislating this solution at a federal level and municipal and state levels as well. I'll share a little bit more about what we do as we go through our presentation, but that gives you a sense of what we're working on and how we're trying to scale up.
All right, so I'm going to blow past the first bunch of slides. Feel free to grab your cameras or take a screenshot. Maddie will send this off to you. But for those of you who do not know me, giving me 15 minutes of time is not nearly enough for the content that I like to present and educate people on. So everybody understands here that Miami generates 8.5 pounds of, hold on, I gotta Miami generates 8.5 pounds per capita per day, and 20% of that was recycled. Before the incinerator burned down, the incinerator handled about 12% of our waste. Um, and so, what has the county done since the incinerator burned down 2 years ago? Trains. We send it to Central Florida. And so, I started taking a look at Miami-Dade County's recycling as a way to um, reduce or eliminate the need for incineration. I know we don't talk about that, really the incineration, in this group, but if we can increase our diversion, then we really have a lot more options that we can talk about. So the participation rate in Miami-Dade County is really, really weak. On the commercial side, it's 35%. And in single family curbside, it's only 55% participation, which is really quite a shame. And what is in the trash that we could reduce or divert is pretty much everything. The only thing we seem to be recycling a major or a significant quantity of is cardboard. And so that leaves a lot of additional materials that we could reclaim. Miami-Dade County is 44th in the state with 19% recycling, and Florida's goal is 75%. So no one's really hitting it except for Charlotte County, but we're doing really, really low. And that the good news is that is a tremendous opportunity to increase our diversion. So recycling is required by law in Florida, Miami-Dade County, and City of Miami, and City of Miami Beach. Um, the Florida state statute is their goal is 75% by 2020, and we have obviously not hit that. The county requires every commercial and multifamily establishment to have a recycling program, as well as residential. And City of Miami ordinance requires recycling at both multifamily and commercial properties as well. City of Miami Beach even goes so further is that with the statement that containers must contain appropriate signage and information that allows users to clearly and easily identify the container for recycling. So let's take a look at what set me off. which one of these is recycling and which one is landfill? Um, the answer is the blue one is supposed to be recycling and the green one is supposed to be uh, landfill. But there's no markings, there's no labeling on it. And so if you don't know, it looks like a can. And in Miami, half the time I'm just happy you put your trash into a can and not just litter it. When we look at residential in territory that is handled by Miami-Dade County, which one of these is recycling? Which one is landfill? They're not marked, they're not labeled. Uh, this is in North Bay Village. Which one of these is landfill? Which one of these is recycling? Um, who knows, right? And in the commercial space, which one of these is landfill? Which one of these is recycling? Um, hint, it's the one on the left with the little yellow label that looks like nothing. So the EPA has developed a national recycling strategy and framework for advancing the U.S. recycling system. And today, I have been primarily focused on how do we reduce contamination in the recycled material stream because the county is facing between 40 to 50% contamination rates in the recycling bins, and basically that means that everybody's just throwing trash in it. And when people throw trash in it, that breaks the entire system. And so I have started a big focus on reducing contamination through good messaging. And that includes unified coloring of bins, universal recycling logo and words that everyone recognizes that is visible on all sides, a detailed label showing what can be recycled, and actual images, not clip art, and simplify what we are asking people to put in the container for the top four things that we really want that have value: aluminum and tin cans, flattened cardboard, plastic bottles where the neck is narrower than the body, and glass bottles. By resetting everyone's mindset, we stop arguing about the yogurt container, about whether that belongs in or not. We stop arguing about whether we put the lids on or take the lids off. None of that matters. We have the basics that have real value, and if we can reset the masses mindset on what should go in the recycling container, then we can get more nuance for those people who want to investigate further. And so there's legislation that I'm working on in various municipalities, which is requiring labeling, which is making sure that the waste haulers are keeping things clean and cleaning up spillage and their vehicles are in shape. And then education and audit services, where we are educating the population and then providing auditing of those and tagging bins that have too much contamination and not accepting those materials. The seventh thing is transparency and chain of custody so that we can build trust in the system. And what I mean by chain of custody and transparency is when the truck comes to your house to pick up the trash or pick up the recycling, you want to be able to follow every step along the process of it going from your place to the recycling facility, where it's then ultimately bundled up and sold off to be turned into new products. And so I partnered with Mitch from Recycle Across America, who has developed these wonderful labels. And I'm going to let you talk about what she has been working on and what Recycle Across America's whole strategy is. Mitch, do you want to drive? Do you just want to tell me when to flip?
Yeah, that sounds great. Dave, go ahead and turn the page.
Okay.
Great. So what Dave just shared with you is excellent. I mean, clearly he has done so much research in what is happening in Miami-Dade County and kind of actually the bigger picture. He's honing in obviously in his own community and county, but everything that he is pulling up is what's happening on a national level. And the image that you see on the screen right now is a little bit of a depiction of what's happening throughout the US. And that's conveyed in what Dave what sparked his interest in looking at this a little bit more closely. And just to point out, if we're not fixing the recycling system in the US at scale, it is leading to a tremendous amount of waste going into oceans. Just to put that in perspective, before China stopped buying US recycling, it was projected that the amount of waste going into oceans was about 48 million pounds a day. And after China stopped buying US recycling and these materials no longer had markets that were being shipped from the US into other countries, the amount of waste increased to about 61 million pounds a day. So there's a direct correlation between recycling not working and the amount of waste going into oceans at scale on a global level. So we can talk about that at another time. But this problem, what you see on the screen right now, and what Dave shared, is why I started this mission to introduce society-wide standardized labels. I was also finding that every business and school, airport, stadium, municipality, everyone was redesigning and recreating and reinventing the communication on their bins. And there's really nothing more important in the system of recycling than what we all do when we walk up to a bin. So the fact that it's this confusing as we go up to a bin is kind of the beginning of the failure of recycling. So if you want to switch to the next screen. So we had a great opportunity to work with Dave and to work with the city of Miami Beach. They provided a grant for Dave and I, Dave's organization and Recycle Across America, to work together and take about 10 buildings, multi-family buildings in the city of Miami Beach. And each of these buildings were very different. One of them was government housing, the other one was a very, very high-end upscale building, and there was a little bit of everything in between. So it really was a great kind of cross-exam microcosm of multifamily housing for all demographics. Next screen. And what we found when we looked at these 10 buildings that were chosen for this pilot or this study was exactly what David talked about. On the left is a picture of a recycling bin and a trash, or excuse me, a recycling dumpster and a trash dumpster at the same property. And it would be very hard to figure out for most people walking by which is which. The images, the three images on the right, even though every building was in the same area of Miami Beach and had the same exact same recycling rules, the way that their recycling rules were presented inside their buildings, if they even had recycling, all of their label and signage were completely confusing. They did it themselves. They made a good attempt, but it wasn't effective, it wasn't consistent, and it was just lacked the effectiveness and simplicity that is needed for people to be able to act properly when they go up to recycle. So, the one thing I do want to point out is that the signage in the middle that has all the circles on it and the signage to the right of that, that's actually in the exact same room of a recycling and trash room in a building. So even in one room, they had two different looking signs that were very conflicting and didn't help the residents be able to recycle right. Next, please. And as a result, members of our team and members of Dave's team and Dave followed Waste Management, who's the recycling hauler of these locations, to do a pre-audit study of the recycling and just to look at the amount of contamination being collected from these buildings. So this is some images of what that recycling looked like. And I'll share with you in just a minute what the results of that audit was. Next screen. So what we did with the funding and with this grant opportunity is we brought in the standardized labels and applied them to the recycling dumpster and applied them to the trash dumpster. The trash standardized trash labels went on those. And then also in each of the buildings that had recycling in those buildings, we were able to install the standardized labels within those trash and recycling rooms. And And then we are also able to provide some additional communication that those building managers, property managers could share with the residents. Next screen. And so the building that had the two signs in the same room on the left, this is what that room looked like afterwards. It had the standardized label over the recycling bin and had the trash label over the trash chute. And next screen. And as a result of installing the standardized labels for all of the buildings that participated that had inside recycling available to their tenants, this is what the recycling contents look like afterwards. And I'll share with you the post audit, but you can see that the materials were really clean. They weren't nearly as contaminated as they were before the labels were installed. Next. And Waste Management did the pre-label audit. Before the labels were installed, the contamination levels were about 54%. They did do an audit after the labels were installed, and if we have more time, I give you more details about that. But to summarize, they ended up pulling material from buildings that didn't have a recycling program in their buildings. And unfortunately, those buildings, their non-existent recycling contaminated the results of the post audit. So we then had a third party, Lady Green Recycling from Miami, go to the buildings where we installed the labels, where they do have recycling in those buildings. And she did, and her team did an audit again after the labels were installed. And what they found were the buildings that had recycling that went from no standardized labels, which was a 54% contamination level. She then audited those buildings again, and what she found was that combined, those buildings had a 5% contamination level. So that went from 54% down to 5%. So we were thrilled with the results of that, of those buildings that participated and actually offered recycling to their tenants. Next. So, lessons learned, and what we've learned, and I'll share with you in just a minute, but we've been doing this for the last 15, almost 16 years, and we now have more than 11 million standardized labels used throughout the US. It's mostly been a viral movement. Very rarely have we ever asked, we're a small nonprofit, so it's not very often that we go and ask anyone to start using the labels. The 11 million really is because it's been viral and so effective. So number one takeaway that we've learned in the 15 years, including in this study in Miami Beach, is that it really is the number one solution to fix recycling that's available today. That's the first, but it really only works as it's intended to when it's at scale. So as we learned with Miami Beach study, if we've got 10 buildings and we're using standardized labels in 8 of those, but 2 buildings don't even offer recycling, but they have recycling dumpsters outside their buildings, but they have no way for residents to recycle. Those recycling dumpsters end up becoming an overflow of the trash dumpsters. And so that contamination ends up kind of ruining the whole system. So one bad apple can certainly spoil the bunch. That is the other thing that we learned. But again, if you've got good recycling in some buildings or in some residential areas, but there's no standardization anywhere else in the community, it's hard to fix recycling at scale unless the standardized labels are implemented throughout that community, throughout that city, throughout that state, and throughout the country. So it can make a difference at smaller levels, but the best impact for affecting oceans and climate change and all of these other systems is by implementing the solution at scale. Um, Obviously, a high level quality material makes a difference for Florida and other communities that have in states that have extreme weather. I share this screen with you right now that there are communities throughout Florida that are starting to implement the standardized labels throughout the whole county. Indian River County is one of them. These are the labels that they're just installing now on all their residential carts. And there's a quote. We're going to share this with you afterwards so you can read through that. Next. And as I said, we've got over 1 million labels that are now being used across the US. They're being implemented throughout all of the national parks. Um, what you see above each of these photos are examples of the impact. So I won't read through all of that because we're going to share this with you. But Super Bowl that implemented the labels, K-12 schools that implemented the labels, national parks that implement the labels, airports, you name it. The impact has been dramatic. And again, our goal is to get this legislated or adopted as best as possible throughout communities in the US. Next. I use this example often that if everyone had to design their own stop signs or speed limit signs for the roads in front of their house or their school or their building or their um, airport, you know, road safety wouldn't work, distribution of goods wouldn't work, our economy would not be what it is today. But thank goodness we have standardized stop signs and speed limit signs and all types of road signs. All of us are only educated once, and you can go to the next screen, Dave. Um, we only have to be educated once when we're 15 or 16, and driving is far, far, far more complicated than recycling will ever be if you pay attention to how confusing driving is from one road to the next. But we're able to do it very easily because of standardized road signs. And we're trying to do the exact same thing as that, but with recycling. Next. And it's not just road signs that are standardized. There's so many of them in our lives today that we kind of take for granted, but they are life changers for us. And so our goal is to just follow that logic and legislation to get the labels implemented and for there to be a little bit more government control over these things. And next. And in the end, our goal is the more that we do recycling right in the US, especially considering we're the biggest producer of waste in the world, the less packaging that will be littered and dumped into waterways and oceans in the US or globally. So here are a couple of next steps. If you want to help, we would love you to do audits of bins in any of the 34 municipalities within Miami-Dade County and present their findings to the municipalities. Again, we can share this with you so you can read the other opportunities, but Dave has been a great advocate in Florida for this mission, and he's certainly available if you want to reach out to him, and I'm certainly available if you'd like to reach out to me, and we can look at ways where we can introduce this to commissioners and public works staff and sustainability committees for municipalities, cities, counties, and the state of Florida.
So, hi everyone, I'm Tenny-Ann and I'm excited to introduce Toothpik. It's a material sorting solution and community that's tackling the growing problem of recycling contamination, as you all heard. We're also intentionally trying to change the culture and what people see as waste, starting in South Florida. So last year, I remember facilitating a community environmental course at Catalyst Miami and learning how we burn and landfill most of our quote unquote trash in Florida. I watched videos, read the reports of people who live near the Doral and old smoky incinerators who got sick, asthma, cancer, and I could not imagine what their families and themselves were going through. Then a few months later, I had multiple people in my own family who got a cancer diagnosis, including my dad, and then I finally understood. The reality is most of what we put into recycling bins doesn't get recycled. In fact, there's a 50-50 chance the last thing you put didn't belong there either. In Miami-Dade, contamination rates reach 40%. In some areas, it's even higher. And that increased their operating costs by 30%. And that's pretty much because people aren't sure what they put in bins. And 1 in 3 Americans gets anxious to recycle, with Gen Z and millennials feeling it the most. And nationwide, contamination adds costs of up to $2 billion every year. And the city of Miami even considered ending contamination. Yeah, that was a lot. So back to that question, what is one item you always get confused about when you recycle? You can go off mute and blurt it out or put it in the chat.
I can read some off from the chat. We've got yogurt containers, pizza boxes, plastic cups, plastic bottles, because they're different codes, paper cups, pizza boxes, styrofoam.
Exactly. So that is where Toothpik is trying to fill in the gaps. Our platform makes sorting materials simple and accurate, guiding users on whether to recycle, compost, and in cases where there's no way to recycle it, trash an item. Yeah, and we can increase the value of recyclables with 86% accuracy, which is much better than the 60% accuracy. And by reducing contamination at the source, we're empowering young people and also creating a culture that recognizes materials as a resource, not garbage, while saving our local government's money. So how does it work? We launched our MVP, which is pretty much a fancy way of saying a tester, to see if this is something that people would care about or if it's just another tech bro idea. And here's how it works. You go to app.toothpik.co, snap a photo of your item, hit analyze, and it tells you exactly where it belongs. Here, we obviously recycle the plastic bottle and we compost my smoothie fruits. This month, we're also adding a community bulletin where you can watch short videos, learn more about composting and things like that. And it's fairly easy to use, accurate, even though we are updating it to make it even more accurate. And our goal is to reframe waste. For example, aluminum cans aren't trash. They're a valuable metal that, when recycled, saves 95% more energy compared to extracting raw materials. And Toothpik really wants to help people see that value when they use our platform. So we launched our pilot program in April, and we were able to help around 235 users sort their materials with over 215 items uploaded so far. On average, people spend around 32 seconds or less figuring out where to put their item. And we've also secured funding in terms of grants and partnered with organizations like Watson Institute, Broward County, and the city of West Palm Beach. And when we did our customer discovery surveys, folks expressed three things. They wanted, better accuracy, they wanted more features, and people wanted prompting where even if an item couldn't technically be recycled, we can find alternatives for it so it still stays out of landfills. For example, taking plastic bags to the grocery store, even though you can't put that in the recycling bin, or taking electronics or furniture to a secondhand store or somewhere else. So we are launching our app in the App Store on October 23, and our main goal is to reach more people through partnerships with universities, municipalities, community pop-up events, improving the accuracy, as I mentioned. Yeah, and with the update, for a bit more context, before it was only able to identify simple things, so like a plastic bottle or just a really clear image with a clear background. And the last thing I uploaded was a picture of me eating like an arepa, and it had the wrapper, the arepa, aluminum can, the paper, and it literally broke it down. It was like, hey, the paper is dirty. You don't want to contaminate that. So it's able to go into much more detail. So our app is free for individual people because obviously we want to make it accessible. We plan to monetize it by partnering with eco-conscious brands and sponsorships that our audience will also resonate with, because maybe you're looking for where to find that eco-friendly laundry detergent. And also showing that consumers are pushing toward zero waste and businesses can profit from that. So it's not just doing the right thing, but also lucrative. We also have a service for businesses like co-working spaces or coffee shops who want to reduce their waste bill. We can connect them with local recyclers and composters and help them reduce the volume of waste they send to landfills while saving money. Doing something somewhat similar to what Mitch and Dave mentioned, by installing labels, like what you see here, and also shows you only compost, napkins or food, recycle newspaper, aluminum can, things like that. And if folks are still confused, they can use the app for guidance. And in the long run, or long term, I should say, we want to move into white label licensing to municipalities so that we can have larger impact, especially since global waste is projected to grow by 70% in 25 years. Yes, 70. All in all, we're trying to bridge the gap between individual behavior, business operations, and systemic waste management. Kind of what Mitch and Dave mentioned, most of the technology out there relies on folks who may already know about recycling. And a lot of competitors out there don't really focus on compost, which accounts for 40% of our waste, or yeah, 40% of our waste. And they rely too heavily on hardware, which is really hard to update. Meanwhile, we provide really quick sorting. We also include information about composting, and we are mainly software based so that it's easy to update. Anyone with a smartphone can access it and it's free. A bit about us. I have 3 years of climate experience. I have my degree in public health, policy, and the environment. And my developers are both master's students. And yeah, we understand Gen Z because we are Gen Z. And I would love to ask for your help in terms of feedback. We are fairly new and our solution definitely is not perfect. So if you'd like to give us feedback, I'll have my contact info on the next slide. We're also having an event, a compost and recycling workshop in West Palm Beach on October 23. Yes, the same day we're launching our app. And it's in partnership with the Florida A&M University, aka FAMU, the Watson Institute, and the city of West Palm. And we're going to be getting in dirt, composting and recycling everything we use at that event. And also, if you know a business who may want to support our app or get in touch, yeah, please let us know. The QR code will take you to my virtual business card if you'd like to chat. And with that, I definitely want to say thank you for your time and looking forward to potentially meeting.